Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and over the past few months I've been talking about Campaign 4 and sort of speculating around where it should be set, when it should be set, what the stakes should be, and just a bunch of other stuff like that. The position that they're in between having to pick if they're going to play a different system or stick with the old system, stuff like that. I've been speculating a lot around Campaign 4, and it's got me thinking, what do I think that Campaign 4 needs to succeed and separate itself from the other campaigns? And with all this speculation has got me thinking about the story of Campaign 4 and what it would need to succeed. Now, what do I mean by succeed? For me, success of a general like D&D campaign like this or a live play or something like that would be to grab the most amount of people and keep them engaged the entire time. Something that arguably Campaign 3 didn't do. So what do I think Campaign 4 needs to be able to do better than Campaign 3 did? And no, this doesn't mean that I think Campaign 3 was bad. I love Campaign 3, but it didn't hold the attention of the vast majority of people like Campaign 2 did. So we need to acknowledge that that did in fact happen, so we need to see what this campaign needs to succeed to be able to do that where Campaign 3 didn't. And one last brief thing before we get started into the list of things that I think Campaign 4 needs to succeed, I just want to say spoilers. Spoilers just in general for anything in campaigns 1 through 3, Critical Role, spoilers, potential spoilers, simple as that, spoilers. So the first thing that I think Campaign 4 needs to succeed is seeing the effects of the other main campaigns. I feel like we're in a time frame now where if we don't see a lot of the things that happened in previous campaigns to change the world, it's going to feel a little odd, right? We've definitely seen a lot of big changes, specifically in Campaign 3, but Campaign 3 is not the only one to make big changes to the world. Technically, Campaign 2 theoretically should also have a massive impact on the rest of the world as time moves forward, because now Campaign 2, specifically we'll start there, has 2 Dunamancy wizards, or at least 2 people who know of Dunamancy outside of the Kryn dynasty, which means that people will be able to learn more about Dunamancy. Caleb and Essek both have a decent amount of understanding of Dunamancy, which means it should, in practice, eventually become more widespread as time moves on, right? And we saw other things in Campaign 3 where there was, Dunamancy vials and stuff like that being moved around, so it should theoretically be happening more and more as time moves on. Outside of that, I can think of another example of, I think at this point in time, there's no way Percy has protected his firearms, properly. It's like, yes, he's done a great job of doing it, but I think it'd be more interesting is if somebody got their hands on the plans on how to make them and firearms became much more widespread. I would love the idea as he gets older, he sort of loses his grip on the whole idea, and it eventually sneaks out and more people get their hands on firearms like what Percy makes before. And then, of course, the last thing that I think needs to be addressed, or at least seen in some form or capacity, would be the gods, right? The gods have become mortal now. They have become humans or elves or whatever form they take when they come back. And to not see the effects of that, I would love to see, as many other people have pointed out, splinter cult factions propping up places, people claiming to be gods when they're not gods, players being gods who don't realize they're gods. I would love to see all sorts of stuff like this as we move forward, because it would be a waste of time and potential, a massive waste of potential, not to sort of delve into this whole new era without the gods and stuff like that. And I think it would be really fun for them to at least have 2 of the players be gods. I think it'd be really cool for one of them to be a betrayer god and one of them to be a prime deity, and they become new people as time moves on, right? Those gods don't have to constantly fall into those lines anymore. If a person who is, a betrayer god in a past life is now someone who sees a lot of the good in people, the stuff he did before as a betrayer god might be changed now. He might think of things differently. And I think that would be a waste of time not to seek that potential out, because it would be a very interesting storytelling possibility. Now, I do want to say, before we move on to the next one, I don't want to see a bunch of references to prior campaigns. I just want to see the effects of other campaigns. I think they need to go the Campaign 2 route and sort of just let the world be itself for a while, not make too many references, maybe once in a while, but don't have characters who reference other characters in their backstories, don't have prior NPCs show up every other episode. Stuff like that needs to be left behind for now, because we're moving into a new era. So I do believe it's important to just let the campaign be its own thing, but we see the effects of other campaigns. I do believe those are 2 different things. The second thing that I think that this campaign needs to succeed is a simpler campaign idea. So what do I mean by this? If you were to look at Campaign 1 and boil it down to its most basic idea, its most basic theme, if you will, in my opinion. It is the heroes protecting their home, right? It starts off with Whitestone, Percy wanting to save and protect Whitestone, and then eventually it turns into Taldore, and they're trying to save Taldore and Iman and other cities in Taldore from the Chroma Conclave before they expand out into Exandria. And then in the last campaign, the last arc of the campaign, they defend the entirety of Exandria from Vecna. So it goes up and up and up as they protect bigger stakes and bigger stakes as time moves forward. But it's still the same base idea of protecting one's home. And then you could do the exact same thing with Campaign 2 and sort of boil it down to its base idea, and it'd be relatively simple. And that is finding one's true self, finding who they really are. Every single member of the Mighty Nine falls in this category with the exception of Caduceus, who firmly believes in who they are already. So everyone else, though, fits in this perfectly. Ford, Jester, Bo, Caleb, Not/Veth, Yasha, even Mollymock all fit into this category. Caduceus is the only standout that doesn't sit in that sort of category. So the entirety of Campaign 2 is finding who they are, which is why it follows mostly their stories and their backstory. And, bigger events in the world don't necessarily apply to them as much because they're more so focusing on themselves. Now, I truly don't think you could boil Campaign 3's theme down into a single sentence like you could to the other two, right? You could say something along the lines of, you're trying to defend the gods from a god eater. Sure, that's one of the themes of the campaign. However, they're not really trying to defend the gods, are they? That wasn't really a thing they cared about so much because some of them didn't think the gods needed to stick around. So it was about sort of ending the cycle of the gods constantly going to war with each other and fighting, with mortals. But some people believed in that idea, right? For them to be the general sitting behind them. Some people in the world believe that. So it's still hard for them to sort of pin down what a theme is. You would have to make multiple sentences to break down what the theme of Campaign 3 is. So that's what I think Campaign 4 needs to avoid. It needs to be much simpler, and it needs to be something you can say in one sentence, as opposed to having to make a full essay explaining what the entire theme is about, which is what Campaign 3 did. That being said, I challenge anyone to make a sentence, a single sentence, similar to defending one's home and finding one's true self, and, still break down everything that's important to Campaign 3. I challenge you to do that in the comment section. So, I mentioned that I believe that Campaign 4 should be a simpler theme. So what should that theme be? And in my opinion, it should be exploration. We are in a new era of the Critical Role world. Exandria and the rest of the realms are in a new era without the gods. So I think now is a good time for them to explore the world. The world is in a new place, and to find new locations in this new place would be a lot of fun, especially because a bunch of them, the cast, have been wanting to go to some of these locations for ages. And even us as viewers, we would love to see more of these places get further out and expanded. Isilra, the Shattered Teeth, Aor, and a bunch of people are screaming for an underwater campaign. It would be so cool for them to just blend all of these ideas together and have it be your separate arcs as you move forward around these locations. I think it'd be a lot of fun for them to be able to do that. And for that to happen would be a lot of fun because it would answer questions about the Shattered Teeth. It would be answering questions about Aor, answering questions about undersea locations. I feel like a lot of people would just love to have a bunch of new lore thrown at them in a very interesting way as you explore the entirety of Exandria. This obviously doesn't mean that a new continent isn't unavailable. They could still do a new continent if they really wanted to, which I think would be a little weird if they were to do it super close to the ending of Campaign 3, but if they still wanted to do that, they can. And it would be yet another location where they could fully explore and fully expand and give us a ton of new lore for. I don't know how it would connect to the rest of the world of Exandria because right now there seems to be a good balance of how each of the continents sort of roll with each other. But if they were to introduce a new location, a completely new continent, I don't think too many people would be upset by that either, because exploration of a new place would be huge for all of us to enjoy. Or exploration of places that we really want to see would be fun for all of us to enjoy as well. So I think just seeing something like that and be super explorative in would be really cool. So now let's cast our eyes back at previous campaigns, right? Campaign 3, Campaign 2, and Campaign 1. Which one would you say was the most popular and most, viewed? Obviously, it's Campaign 2. Now, there's multiple reasons why Campaign 2 would have gotten this moniker, and part of it is because COVID. It was really easy for people to sit down and watch 4-hour things multiple times a week, if not multiple times a day, like I did during COVID. But another thing that sort of helped it was the relatability of the characters and how often the story revolved around them and their backstories. And I think something like that could really benefit Campaign 4, to sort of go for that Campaign 2 vibe and to sort of explore the backstories of people while also exploring places that we haven't seen before would be a brilliant idea for them to do. And for them to really focus on whatever the next party would be, as opposed to just focusing on a handful of backstories like Aurum, Fern, and Imogen, or, you know, instead of just focusing on a handful of backstories like in Vox Machina, where only like, you know, Vax, Keyleth, Vex, and Percy were focused on, where everyone else sort of fell back in the wayside. To have focus for everybody at some point in the campaign would be really fun, because eventually that means your favorite character in the group gets their story front and center, which I think would be very fun for us to see again. It's one of my favorite parts of Campaign 2 is the fact that everyone had their moments to shine. Caduceus was the only one that sort of didn't get this, because realistically, Caduceus wasn't there to be a character to have the spotlight. He was there to support other people. But every other character in Campaign 2 had the spotlight at some point in time, and it really did make them all shine like, well, for lack of a better term, stars. They all shone so brightly, and it was so fun for us to watch. I would love for that feel to be brought back for Campaign 4, and the focus to be on them as opposed to some world-ending story like Campaign 3 or even Campaign 1. So the last thing that I think Campaign 4 needs to avoid in this case is the too many jesters claim. So for those of you who don't know, the too many jesters thing is because Jester was a very chaotic character in Campaign 2 and was very funny and very energetic. And unfortunately, this is labeled the character, which I think is bullshit, by the way, as a mild joke character. But then when Campaign 3 came around, a lot of people noticed that a lot of the other player characters in the Bell's Hells were very chaotic and wild and jokey. Fern's very chaotic and wild. FCG has, their entire name convention is some sort of joke. Chetney has the whole RTA thing, which is a big joke that they go off of for a long time. Laudna is also a very chaotic individual. So there's a lot of people who sort of point to the Campaign 3 characters as a too many jesters archetype. Too many people who could fit in the same archetype of jester that is chaotic. I think this is a load of bullshit. I've personally always fucking hated the idea, and I'm sorry I'm swearing so much, but I've never liked this idea one iota. The idea that the party of the Bell's Hells is mostly chaotic is foolish. These jokes are very, I want to say, surface level and have a fun laugh and payoff eventually down the line, but they're not all jokes, right? Specifically, let's look at Fern. Fern's backstory and Fern's character is not a joke. A person who was left behind by her parents because they felt that she'd be safer without them being around because of their involvement with the Unseelie Court, being left to live 120 plus years with her fucking hag of a grandmother to eventually be left out and have to go find her family. That's not a joke character, and to be revealed that there is a likelihood that she becomes a very dark entity, while yes, chaotic, is not a joke. There's nothing joking about that backstory. It's actually very sad if you think about it. Same with FCG. FCG, yes, their name is a joke. Yes, it was there to set up the pussy line. Yes, that was there to set up the one-eyed monster killed my pussy line later. But outside of that, FCG's backstory is horribly tragic. To have been a part of a thing where a bunch of political members of Aor were killed off by a bunch of sleeper agent robots, and then eventually the robots having to be rebuilt by another robot named Vexian after being built by the Mighty Nine, only to then lose that family that helped rebuild to rebuild them, is bullshit. Like, to sit there and say that that's a joke is bullshit. And I've always fucking hated the fact that they get this label of too many jesters without people looking at the backstory and how actually tragic a lot of their backstories are. Chetney included. Chetney went through a whole bunch of shit in his life, and you'll see the RTA joke and recognize the alpha and the whole werewolf thing, and that's all they see from that character. That is a load of dog shit. That is a load of werewolf shit. I refuse to sit here and think that that is true about the characters, about the Bells. That is not true. Okay, we lost ourselves in that rant for a little bit, but my point is simply that I think for the first handful of episodes of Campaign 4, we need to not have the perceived notion that there's too many jesters in the party. And I hope I've made that clear by that mild rant that I've actually cut short for you because they went on for way longer, so sorry. But, point being, we need to avoid the too many jesters idea, even though it's bullshit. We need to avoid it like the plague, because we really do want people to look at these characters and go, huh, there's something here to them, without them going, huh, all this character is a joke character, which is bullshit, but we still need to avoid it. So these are the story things that I think Campaign 4 needs to succeed in the eyes of the mass majority of people. So I'm curious as to what you guys think story-wise is needed for Campaign 4 to succeed. I don't, we're not going to talk about like systems here. We're not going to talk about players or anything like that. I want to talk about stories and like what the themes of this stuff could be. So let me know in the comments what stuff like that you think could be needed for Campaign 4 to succeed. And with all that being said, I will see you guys for whatever video I make next. Peace.